My name is Carse. I've been asked to present on behalf of Yes Orkney tonight, but there are quite a number of my Yes colleagues in the audience, and so any questions I struggle with, I'm looking for them to come in and help me with. But it's great to see so many people here. This is the second of our trips around the parishes and islands, and we're in Ham to start with, and the next one is in Stromness. And thereafter, we're going to try and get to every parish and every island. I think getting to every parish might be tricky, so there's a suggestion that we might be putting 2 or 3 parishes together and then advertising a particular venue. I don't know quite how that will work out. However, I would ask you if you could help me just on one matter, and it became very obvious to us in Ham, and that was that people from Earnest came across the Ham and asked at the door if they were allowed in, which was a bit disappointing from my point of view, because what we had hoped we had put the message across was that it doesn't matter where we are, feel free to come to any of these meetings. So any one of you can come to any other meeting. But more importantly, if you know of people who either couldn't make it tonight, or you've got friends or relatives in another part of Orkney, for goodness sake, just let them know, go along and have a listen. If you want to do that, that's just strong. House rules to begin with any of these venues these days is the fire exit is immediately at the door you came in, and there is one here. So if the fire alarm goes off, it's for real, and we get out ASAP. Okay? This evening is going to take the form of 3 different sections. I'm going to be presenting, but my brother is in the middle, George from Westray. He's going to be presenting so that the slides can go on, because I was unable to get them to run on a timer. Lack of IT skills, should have been at the college, so there'll be a presentation by myself, some facts and figures and some thoughts really, to try and just give you a perspective from Yes Orkney. Then there'll be a general question and answer session, and then what we would like to do is a third session where I may get a chance to discuss things at the tables where we are at the moment, and people from Yes Orkney will come and join me to have a bit of discussion. You've all got a leaflet, a black leaflet in front of you, and in reading that you will see that what we're very keen to do is to try and stimulate any questions. We're finding the majority of people at the moment still don't know from this campaign, and there are a lot of questions that want answered. So what these evenings are about is to try and help you answer these questions. If you don't find those satisfactory, for goodness sake, fill in your question on that black leaflet. You can see that you could send it back to Yes Scotland, or you could give us it this evening, and we will find you, or hopefully provide you with an answer. So, thank you. Nice to see you. So if we could just move on, and I'll just talk my way through these slides. That is the position we're all in. The future of our country and these islands is in our hands. Could they just move on? Sit down arrow. And that's the question we're going to be asked. I was quite interested that we were running a quiz one night, and when I asked, what's the question will be on your ballot paper, there was actually a lot of people struggling to know that focus. And I was quite pleased that there was 1 or 2 prominent politicians that did it. So anyway, that's the question you're going to be asked. Should Scotland be an independent country? The answer will be yes or no. At the moment, however, as I say, the majority of people we're finding out don't know. And what we're anxious to find out is where you are on this kind of spectrum. One is you're definitely going to vote no, 10 is you're definitely going to vote yes. The majority of people are somewhere in between. What we're keen to know is if you're a 5, what would move you to 6? If you're an 8, what would move you to 9, etc. Or if you're down to 2, it would move you up several slots. But anyway, that's where I am. I'm not asking you to declare that this evening, but it's the kind of thing I'd leave with you so you can have a think about it. So really this is about trying to build a better future for all of us, a better society, I think, which reflects our hopes and ambitions. And the genuine thing is that the people who care most about our future are the people who are living here and making their home here. And that's why it's people in this country that get the chance to vote in this referendum. Because at the end of the day, the result is the result that we'll all have to live with, whatever way it goes. Thanks. So I'm going to cover these things. Could we survive as an independent country? Can we afford independence? The effect we might have on Orkney and what's been achieved to date. So, the first thing is a lot of people tell you Scotland's too small to be an independent country. But not according to these guys. You just don't know. Indeed, this guy, this is Nigella Lawson's father, and he was Margaret Thatcher's Chancellor in the Conservative government in the 80s. And that's what he said. Scotland's perfectly capable of being an independent nation. There are many independent countries in the world that have a lot less going for them. And here are some of them. There are 193 independent countries making up the United Nations at the moment. 90 of those countries are either the same size or smaller than Scotland. And here are just some of them. Those on the left are countries that have got a population of 5 million plus. Those on the right are population of 4 million plus. You would notice here, Croatia. Not only did we play them in the World Cup qualifiers, along with Macedonia and Wales, who are also smaller than us, but Croatia are also the most recent entry into the European Union, even though they only won their independence 10 years ago. Most of the countries in the United Nations have won their independence, so we move on, haven't won their independence since the Second World War. And here are 6 other countries. The top 3 are no bigger than Orkney. And yet it's considered that they're viable independent countries in their own right, and have been for some considerable number of years. And the last 3 are just smaller than Orkney and Shetland combined, Liechtenstein, Monaco, and St. Kitts. You can move on, George. Here are some others that you might be more familiar with. And I would draw your attention to people like Luxembourg, whose population is no bigger than Edinburgh. So could we afford independence? I'm going to look a bit at the income and then the spending side of it. But at the moment we generate 9.9% of all the UK taxes and we only get 9.3% of that money back. If we got 9.9% back, then the Scottish Parliament would have an extra £4.4 billion to spend on its people. We've got 24 billion barrels of oil remaining in the North Sea, and at the moment the wholesale value of that's about 1.5 trillion at these prices. And those figures were put forward before the announced Cracker, the big oil field that's going to be developed up the west of Shetland. And it also came out on a report on the 11th of November by Sir Ian Wood, who is in the northeast of Aberdeenshire. And he's suggesting that we could take even more oil, because the current technology allows us to take more oil, and we get to fields that previously were inaccessible. But also, that report by Ian came out Sir Ian Wood said we could take more out of technology. But what Chick Brodie found out was that there would be a massive cover-up, because in the 1980s, there's a lot of these 30-year papers coming out at the moment. In the 1980s, there were 2 major oil companies wanted to drill on the west coast of Scotland, and they were stopped from doing so by the MOD, because they used it as target practice. So, but if there was 2 oil companies wanting to drill for oil and gas out there, the suggestions are that there is oil and gas out there, or there's a possibility. This is what we've got. We've got what it takes to be an independent country, there's no question. We're making that kind of money out of these kinds of industries. Big amounts of money, but the revenues for them are going to Westminster. And we also have 25% of Europe's wind and tidal energy potential, and 10% of Europe's wave power potential. So there's a lot of money that would be generated in Scotland that could be retained in Scotland. But the significant thing for me anyway is the gross domestic product, which is all the goods and services that they produce in Scotland. It's per head of population, it's currently 28,500. In the UK it's just over 24,000. So even without our oil, our population is producing 99% of what's produced as the UK average. Savings that we could come up with. If we were not, we didn't have 59 MPs at Westminster, we didn't have the House of Lords, that would save 50 million. The whole of the Scottish Parliament would vote for Scotland to be anti-nuclear, where we are anti-nuclear. The current running costs are 250 million. They want to turn Fastlane into a conventional naval base, and if so, we would reduce, well, we wouldn't have the cost of trying, and those funds could pay for teachers, nurses, primary schools, as we're showing at the bottom. So, the people living in Scotland generate £10,700 per head in taxes, and that compares with the UK average of 9,000. So we're actually, where there's more activity going on here, generating more revenues. Our public spending is a lower percentage of the economy than the UK, and our Scotland's deficit is 5% of GDP, which is lower than the UK average. And also, the Treasury will guarantee UK debt even when Scotland votes yes. That's been stated by the Treasury. Not for all time, but in the period of negotiations, and it will deal with the debt. Now, so can we use the pound? Alistair Darling stated in January of last year in a Newsnight interview that using the pound, Scotland keeping the pound post-independence would be both logical and desirable. Nobody knows why, but he's changed his mind, but that was his statement last January. The significant thing about this is that there's a thing called transaction taxes, as most business people in this room will know. And that is that if you're buying and selling goods and having to exchange currency, if you're working between currencies, then there is what's called the transaction tax to convert one currency into the other. If we were using the pound, £500 million worth of transaction taxes would be avoided, or not necessary. So can we afford independence? Well, if we were independent today, we would be the 8th wealthiest country in the OECD, that's the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. That's compared with UK's 16th place. So that's why this guy is saying we're perfectly capable of being independent, and that a lot of independent countries in this world have a lot less going for them than Scotland. So, the question is not could we be independent, it's should we be independent. Okay? And that's what's on your ballot paper. Because everybody, the Prime Minister and everyone else is agreeing we could be a viable independent country. So should we be an independent country? This is one thing to look at. Westminster isn't working for us, and in the last 34 out of the last 68 years, since the war, Scotland's been run by a government that didn't vote for. The Scottish Parliament as a whole, a majority of the Scottish Parliament were against privatisation in Royal Mail, but we can't stop it. We're against the tax and welfare reforms, or when I say we, I mean the Scottish Parliament. And as you can see, I'm saying the Scottish Parliament, I'm not talking about Scottish Government. These votes were taken across parties. So it's not an SNP position, it's a Scottish Parliament position. They were against and continue to be against tax and welfare reforms that we brought to fruition, but again, we can't do anything about that. And there has been a health and care bill passed in England which has started the privatisation of the NHS in England. And the chief whip, or one of the chief whips, which took this legislation through the Westminster government was Alistair Darling. So, you've got the privatisation of the health service started in England, and the Scottish Parliament consensus there is that we want the NHS to be free at the point of need. So, We've only got one Tory MP in Scotland, yet they run Scotland at this moment. And yet here are the Scots MPs' voting record on recent policies. 81% against welfare cuts, 91% against bedroom, 60% don't want trident, 82% are against the railway cellar. That's the Scottish Parliament's budget, which is £35 billion. It looks like a lot of money. But if we move on, it's only 7% of the taxes raised in Scotland. And if you go for the Scotland Act, which is what's being offered as an alternative to yes, vote no and we'll give you the powers that are in the Scotland Act, you would still only have 15% of public purse being controlled by the Scottish Parliament. The rest being controlled by Westminster. So look at the record of the Scottish Parliament. And I say the Scottish Parliament again, because some of this was done by the Lib coalition in the first few years. What have they introduced? We just go through it. Go to S&Ps in this country. You just keep going, just on a steady pace. We've got free personal care for the elderly. There are no prescription charges in this country. Household tax is frozen and has been for the last number of years. There was land reform, which allowed places like Gia and Egg to buy the land from the absentee landlords and start to make those islands prosper. We have an anti-nuclear policy, agreed, but significantly, the Scottish Parliament has produced balanced budgets for the last 6 years. And yet, when a lot of these things were being discussed at the outset, being put forward as ideas, these are things we would like to introduce, the Scottish Parliament was being told quite categorically, you can't afford it. You've proven you can afford that with a very limited budget. And those are the powers we get if we had 100% of the tax that was paid in Scotland coming to the Scottish Parliament. These are the key levers that people speak about that we don't have control over. So what about Orkney's future in all of this? Our leading industries are these, plus another couple which I'll come to in a minute, farming and fishing. But what's important is that each one of these industries features very prominently in the Scottish Parliament's blueprint, strategy, whatever you like to call it, for the way forward for Scotland. They feature very strongly, and what's also featured very strongly, is because we gather from earlier comments, is that they want to maintain a good mixed economy, excellent public services, all of which bring wealth and create jobs. Witness the amount of money that's been spent by the Scottish Parliament in Orkney. Schools, hostel, new hospital, and so on and so forth. In fact, the renewables industry, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of money comes in here, and a lot of jobs are generated as a result of that. We're also in a position where when our islands are a future we know all about, the three island groups looking for more powers coming forward. They're the first people to discuss that with them were the Scottish Parliament. The UK Parliament subsequently come into discussions, but the first people to discuss it were the Scottish Parliament. And a significant point that they take on this, excuse me, is that if we're an independent country and we were discussing with the European Union how we would continue our membership, what other countries such as Finland find is that the best way of getting extra powers for your island groups is at the point at which you renegotiate your terms and conditions of entry. But this is what I think we should be concerned about. Orkney farming is not getting the money that the EU have put aside for Scottish farming. Scottish farming was allocated in the last round of the Common Agricultural Agreements 230 million euros. It was allocated to Scotland because of the particular difficulties that our farmers face. And Westminster has chosen to only pass on to the person 16.4% of that money to Scotland. Now, given how important farming is to our community, the knock-on effect of farming and all the jobs that rely on farming and the income that it generates within Orkney, this is a serious point that £60 million a year until 2020 has been held back from Scottish farming and therefore Orkney. Now, I know there are various discussions going on about how you deploy the money that was allocated, etc., etc. But we have to remember that Scottish Parliament is only being allowed to distribute 16.4% of the money that was allocated to Scotland. It should actually be discussing how it could distribute 100% of that money to its farmers. Another problem we face is that our fishing grounds are being damaged. It's a very important thing here. Dredgers are moving in. They've been kicked out of other bits of the European Union. They're here, they're dredging, they're causing problems. And for our fleet, which is largely inshore, and is bringing up crabs and lobsters, etc., some of which goes away as live products, some of which goes away as processed product, this is quite a damaging thing from an Orkney perspective. But the Scottish Parliament can't stop it at the moment with the legislation that's available to it. Westminster would have to stop it, and it's not stopped. And the significant thing about both of those last two industries is that they are heavily reliant, to some extent, on European money. And yet in 2017, David Cameron has said that there will be an in-out referendum in Europe. So where will that leave Orkney if we vote to come out of Europe? Not just with fishing and farming, but with all the other industries we've mentioned, because the European Union is a big market for all of our products, whether it be food and drink, craft, tourism, you mentioned. When you're speaking to no, ask them these things. What guarantees can they give you about delivering on their promises and timescales? Because they're coming at you with ideas. And do all the parties who are supporting no agree on the same offer? I would say no, but you would need to ask them that question. The other thing you need to ask them is what will they do about the Barnett formula? If you vote no, the Barnett formula is a formula that's used to decide how much money is distributed to Ireland, Wales, England and Scotland. There's a suggestion that the Barnett formula will be scrapped, and a lot of the political parties at Westminster agree with that idea. The Scottish Parliament doesn't. But if it was implemented, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that Scotland would lose a further £4 billion from its budget. Am I correct? The other thing is to remember the 79 referendum. Many of us in this room will remember the 79 referendum. Many won't. Looking at a couple of people. But when the 79 referendum, we were told, vote no, you'll get something better. Nothing happened. We didn't vote no, we voted yes. By 100,000 people voted yes, they wanted a Scottish Parliament. But because the 40% rule and the way the vote was tinkered with, damaged, gerrymandered if you want, Scotland voted yes for a Parliament but didn't get it. And it was 20 years later before we got a Scottish Parliament. So, the same could apply. Significantly, this only came out on the 8th of February. This is a guy called Guy Lodge, who works for a leading think tank which influences the Labour Party, and he was stating that Labour appears to be a retreat from an offer of tangible and substantial powers for the Scottish Parliament. And in this country, Labour is a significant force. And if that's an independent person saying that, there's something going on. And you've got parties out there who are supposedly on a common front to get you to vote no, but they're not on a common front about what will happen if you say it. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make you fear. They did it in 79 and it worked to a 610. But we still voted yes. But they're going to come up with all sorts of things to make you fear the voting yes. This is one of them. Alistair Darling, when he was in Orkney, he said, oh, cut off your pals, cut off your friends, cut off your family, I need passports, bless them is what will happen. Here we go. Well, I wasn't going to touch on that, but there will always be a customs union in the UK, and nobody will be a foreigner in the royal country. But significantly, that's the border between the Republic of Ireland and the Northern Ireland. I don't see any passport office. In here you're told that an independent Scotland can expect to start with a healthier state of finances. That came out at the beginning of February. Well, and now this is the Financial Times saying the use of the pound is sensible, but significantly, an independent Scotland can expect to start with a healthier state of finance than the rest of the UK. And getting into Europe is the other fear story that will be used. And yet, if you remember, this man here was the Secretary of State for Scotland until October of last year when he was changed and it became Alistair Carmichael. But Michael Moore is stating that there will be no objections from EU member states to an independent Scotland being granted its own membership. And he is supported in that point of view by a man called Graham Watson. And Graham Watson is the leader of the Lib Dems in Europe. This you may or may not know, but Westminster could shut down the Scottish Parliament tomorrow. We wouldn't need any new additional legislation. It can just happen because it's built into the process at the moment. And indeed, they're currently taking powers away from the Welsh Assembly. Now, some people will say, well, those are legal powers, and Wales shares its legal system with England. Fair enough, I don't necessarily disagree with it. But why was it okay to give them the powers in the first instance and now take them away again? What's the next thing that we do? And the No campaign are saying that David Cameron isn't the right person to make the case for continued Westminster government of People's Scotland. Well, that's true from my perspective. Why is the right person to be governing us just now? I would like you to bear this in mind, and that is on the 18th of September, you're not being asked to vote for the current Scottish Government, for the SNP, or for Alex Salmond. We know Alex Salmond, like Marmite. Either love him or you hate him. Some people have enormous time for him and loads of respect, and he wins awards all over the world as being a top-class politician and a top-class economist. But he creates for some people, and they don't like it. But you're not being asked to vote for him. You're being asked to vote, should Scotland be an independent country? And when we vote yes in 2014, it will be 2016 before we vote for the first Scottish Government. And in that 1.5 years to 2 years between September of this year and the first election of an independent government, there will be a political realignment in this country. We can be sure of that. Is it okay if I cross my line just for a minute? Sorry, it took me up, but I'm not very far away from here. But we do have to remember this. There will be a political realignment. There may be an SNP, there may not. There may be a strong Labour Party, there may not. The Greens may come to the top. We may have more individuals winning seats. We may have more independent MPs. We don't know what will happen. But you can bet your bottom dollar it will be realigned from what we currently have. but it's Westminster Hall. Right? If you're undecided, we'd like you to tell us why. That's the purpose of coming tonight, is to have a chat about what's concerning you. So the forms are there, but equally, you can go on this website, YesScotland.net, undecided, and ask your questions there. So what I'm asking you to do is to take account of all the facts that have been put forward, look into the future, see what you see, but hopefully you'll find the courage to vote yes. For me, it's yes for Orkney and yes for Scotland. And that's how you would contact us if you want to speak to us in the future. So before the end of the night, if you want to take that, you're free to do so. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'll just leave that up. But we'll throw the floor open to questions, comments. Is there anybody that would like to come in with a comment or a question? No?
I think we need to make it clear that they're voting for the future of Scotland, not the SNP. It's not clear enough. I was told yesterday by friends of my own age who are not voting yes, that of course you vote SNP. I don't.
No.
And you really are intending to say you're voting for Scotland.
I would agree. That's why I put that up. Yeah. But it's a very important point to be able to put forward. Yeah. Well, I'll go here first. Yeah.
Thanks, no, I think it's just going to follow on from that. I'll just move back to all that you commend. And you're right, there's a lot of people do think one of the last points where, we're not voting SNP. I can tell you that, of course, the Green Party are independents. The Green Party is pro-independence, and I was advocating for the Yes campaign with Green Party members, and also, I would say, Labour Party members. There's now a Labour for an independence movement. There's quite a lot of Labour people that are unhappy about the stance that their party is taking. And I was also an ex-Lib Dem chap down there, and I could see that reflected here too. So it's people are coming from all spectrums of the political field. Thank you.
Yeah. I would also point out that Yes Orkney, the majority of people are not in a party. They're not in a political party and haven't been for that. Is there any other points? I'm passing this around just in case.
Would you join this comment? If there was to be a yes vote, how confident would you be that the views of Orkney would not be swamped by the central belt of Scotland, and that some of the disadvantages that you see at the moment that might not still apply to an island community such as this?
That's a very good question. How I would Scotland that switch me up? No, it's pretty good. Right far? Switch it on. Is that done? Sorry, John. It's me that switched off. Yeah, well actually that question came up when I was debating, or Donna and I were debating, with the farmers, because we went to the agricultural discussion group. And on the other side we had Liam and we had Hugh Harper Johnson. And how I was discussing that with them was, to be honest, I would be looking for the Lib Dems to step up to the plate and really come to the fore, insofar as they've always been federalists. They've always believed in having a federal system whereby every part of the country had more powers. And there wasn't any disagreement on that. So I would think the key thing would be the majority of the parties that have sway in the Scottish Parliament have a federalist approach to this. But more significantly, I think locally, is our own local authority have taken the bull by the horn, as we have Western Isles and Shetland. And they are hammering out a deal at this very moment. They'll probably hammer out 2 deals, one for yes and one for no. But the very fact that it is being hammered out, I think that gives me hope that when we vote yes, there will be a very structured approach already in place that will be beneficial to Orkney and the other island groups, and hopefully to places like Argyll as well. But you and I are from Edinburgh. I'm very much a federalist. I don't want to see power concentrated in the central belt. Is there anything else?
I think that point that one is as far easier to negotiate as a small remote island community in Edinburgh than it is to Westminster.
I think what Paul was saying was that as a small remote island community, it's far easier to negotiate in Edinburgh than it is with Westminster. And I think that's what Edinburgh is for you, Westminster politicians who have not visited Orkney versus the Edinburgh, and Holding politicians who have visited Orkney and having an opportunity to discuss and negotiate with that level.
I think this is one of the questions that really worries people in Orkney. That they feel, why should they trust anyone on the centre of the anymore than they should trust Ireland, because they equally see this. But one of the things that we don't have in the UK is any kind of written constitution or rules for how the country works. And something that we would have with an independent Scotland would be rules which our local authority, and us as a people of Orkney, would have an input into framing, which would mean where we could say, people that live in isles or offshore isles have to have, say, a particular committee in the government for the state for rights for eco transport or RIT or whatever. And it was interesting at the Our Islands Our Future conference, where the man who represented the peripheral areas was talking, a Frenchman called Jean-Didier Cash. And he said that 80% of all Europe's islands, of the countries that are part of the EU, have negotiated on entry to EU special status or rights for their different islands. And these could take all sorts of different shapes. It could be representation of committee, it could be guarantees in terms of funding for fixed links or access, and mitigating remoteness or freight costs, that kind of thing. There's no one sort of specific thing that the different places are using, but it shows that there are options that are available to places like Orkney, with the potential shape-up of how we become part of Europe under our own scheme. So what can make that point?
Very good. Thank you very much. Is there any other comment before we like to make?
Thanks, Ian. People often say to me, but it's an uncertain future if you vote for independence, but it's uncertainty either way. Personally, I'd rather go with uncertainty with power than uncertainty without any power to do anything about it at all. And people need to take that into account. If you vote no, you're not voting for the status quo at all. It's all change. All the parties at Westminster have said that they will cut the Scottish Budget by £4 billion. That was in the press. It is not going to be a question of staying at home and it'll all be just the same. It really isn't. Uncertainty with power. That's what we need.
Yeah, that's right. I'll give my account on that.
Well, I'm just going to try and make the same point as Thomas just made, that the status quo is not the status quo. And it's fine for David Cameron to say things like the Barnett formula is guaranteed. If you read the small print, it's guaranteed for 18 months. It's a very short period. It's guaranteed until after the referendum, when it will then be reconsidered. And Colin Jones in Wales, for example, you mentioned that the Welsh government and the Welsh Assembly has given up some. Well, that is actually a deal with Westminster. They got all money for giving up some of their legal powers. Which is why Father Jones has been in Scotland about 6-8 weeks ago saying we're better together. Because he actually got a good deal from the Conservative government, despite not being Conservative himself. He got a good financial deal from Westminster, and that's why he thinks it's a great idea. But the status quo, as you rightly pointed out, will not remain the same. So it's very easy to say, oh, we don't have the answer, you don't know what will happen if you vote yes with X, Y, Z. And we don't, because we're not independent. So until we don't know how well something will work. But there are many areas that we also don't know how it's going to work if we don't know. Because it's quite clear that various parties in Westminster cannot agree on the way forward. And that's that.
Anyway, on a different topic, anything else? Yeah, we're proud here in Orkney of our connections with the Nordic countries, particularly Norway and Orkney and Hordaland are twins, and we have close relationships with Grimstad County as well. Norway became independent in 1907 and Finland in 1917, also a Nordic country. Now these are small, very well-run countries. They're high wage, they're high growth, they're high cost, they're high standards. They're also, in these surveys, they're among the best places in the world to live in. They have control over their own affairs. 100 years ago, these countries were poor and poorly run, and now they're not. They are what they are, mainly because of the efforts of the people who live and work there. They've created societies that are good places to live in, to work in, to bring their families up in. Also, they have a much smaller difference between the richest and the poorest in society. And one of the things that's happened in the UK over the last 30 years is that the difference between the richest and the poorest has got much greater. And the poorer people on minimum wage, for example, have to rely on food banks and such like. We haven't had that kind of thing since the 1930s, since the Great Depression and so on. So a few extra things to think about there.
For anybody that's not familiar, the food bank in Orkney is actually in the old Juicy's Yard. So it affects us as well as it affects every other part of the country.
Is there anything else, folks? Or can I just draw it to a close with one or two more? Okay, one last point. And then what I think we'll do is we'll move to a situation whereby we could just sit at small tables and have a discussion.
Thank you. I must say, we've been watching the renewable energies going in the Orkney. One of the things that upset me was the Julian was my objection to nuclear power. We saw the objection years ago to uranium mining here, so now we're trying to lead in renewables, but nothing at table in order for this to become viable. I was very disturbed to get an email from Mike McKenzie, who was pointing out that it should be the UK government that's got the power to the other cable that they won't. Sort of makes me a bit suspicious that they don't want our power to work, or renewable power to work, because that proves our viability.
That's a fair point.
So,
Okay. Keep it up.
Yeah. I think one overarching point that should be made is most people who are maybe not kind of Facebookers and generally social media site type people with that kind of life replacement habit, people who are not tuned into alternative media need to be very almost shrewd to keep an eye on the mainstream media.
I know that certainly older generations of people are maybe sitting in front of the BBC a lot more than others. You have to just watch the BBC type media slant because it's not impartial. And it's really, really quite worrying that as time goes on, it doesn't seem to be getting any less more impartial. So you have to inquire for yourself. If you're not sure, you really have to dig underneath. Look at original documents, try and find coverage of Parliament, try and read between the lines and not get it yourself because the media is not going to be a reasoned argument.
If I could just back that up by saying that there's an academic study done by the University of the West of Scotland over a year which they wanted to teach some programmes at SEP and found considerable bias in that, a factor of 3 to 1 stories in favour of the Union against stories in favour of independence. Also, they found that they were guilty of omission, i.e. they did not present both sides of the story at any time. So that's a proven independent academic study which you can find online if you like as well. And they've actually attempted to bully that academic into rescinding his claims, which he has not done.
Okay.
And that was why in part we put the slides about questions you should maybe ask them. So, because you'll be going to something where they'll present their case. The questions that are put up need to be answered, as well as taking account of the last two speakers.